The wind howled across the vast steppe. Grass bowed and swayed in waves, and above, flocks of giant birds circled in the pale sky. At the edge of a river, a small group of early humans stood motionless. Their eyes were fixed on a colossal figure drinking from the water. Its tusks curved like ivory scythes, its massive body towering like a moving hill. It was a mammoth, the master of this prehistoric land. For these early humans, such a creature was both terror and temptation. Its flesh could feed an entire clan for weeks, its hide could provide warmth through the bitter cold, and its bones could become weapons and tools. Yet to approach it meant to flirt with death. One wrong move, and a single sweep of its tusks could crush bones like dry twigs. From a scientific perspective, this moment reflects the precarious relationship between early humans and megafauna during the Pleistocene epoch. Archaeological evidence, such as sites with butchered mammoth remains, shows that humans did not merely scavenge carcasses, they hunted. This marked a turning point in the survival strategy of Homo erectus and later Homo sapiens. The group exchanged glances. Some held sharpened spears made of stone and wood, while others clutched rocks. But what they truly carried was not just weapons, it was courage shaped by necessity. Hunger had forced them to consider the impossible, to face the beast head-on. Anthropology suggests that such hunts required not only physical strength but also coordination and shared strategy. Without communication, without trust, survival against such a giant was unthinkable. Thus, the seeds of human cooperation, which would later define our species, were sown here, in the shadow of the beast. And so, with the mammoth raising its head, water dripping from its trunk, the first hunters tightened their grip on their weapons. Fear lingered in their eyes, but behind it flickered something new, the determination to change their fate. The story of humanity was about to cross another threshold. The mammoth stepped slowly across the riverbank, unaware of the watchful eyes tracking its every move. The hunters shifted in silence, spreading out like shadows in the tall grass. For the first time, this was not a chaotic rush toward prey, it was a plan, a deliberate circle of strategy. Some positioned themselves ahead, ready to block its path. Others moved behind, closing off escape routes. Spears were raised, not yet thrown, but prepared for the moment when instinct and timing aligned. The circle was uneven, fragile, yet it represented a new idea, that many, when united, could face what one alone could never conquer. From a scientific lens, this is one of humanity's earliest tactical breakthroughs. Evidence from prehistoric kill sites suggests that early hunters used natural traps, cliffs, swamps, or narrow valleys, to corner massive animals. Such coordination required foresight, communication, and even role differentiation. Some frightened the animal forward, while others attacked. Anthropologists consider these hunts a vital step toward the development of social bonds and early language. The mammoth's ear twitched. It lifted its head, sensing movement. The hunters froze. For a heartbeat, time stood still. Then, one of them let out a sharp cry, a signal. Spears rattled, voices rose, and the circle began to tighten. Fear surged in every chest, but it was bound together by a greater force, shared survival. No longer were they just individuals chasing prey, they had become a unit, bound by purpose. Though many such hunts failed, the attempt itself was a revolution. It showed that humans were learning to transform weakness into strength, not by muscle, but by cooperation. And so, on that riverbank, beneath the pale sky, the first circle of hunters was drawn. It would not be the last. The circle tightened. The mammoth bellowed, its voice shaking the earth like thunder. Birds scattered from the grass, and the hunters felt the tremor run through their legs. Before them was not just prey, but a living mountain of muscle and fury. One hunter lunged first, hurling a spear that grazed the beast's thick hide. The mammoth roared, swinging its tusks, and the ground seemed to quake beneath its charge. The hunters scattered, dodging death by heartbeats. The air filled with the clash of stone tips against hide, with cries of fear and courage mingled together. This was no easy kill. Modern paleontology reminds us that such animals were not helpless giants, they were fast, aggressive, and immensely dangerous. Fossilized mammoth skeletons often show healed wounds from human weapons, proving that many hunts ended with the animal surviving, while hunters perished. In fact, anthropologists suggest that the mortality rate during big game hunts was staggeringly high. Yet humans persisted, for the reward meant life for the entire clan. Back on the riverbank, the hunters regrouped. One banged rocks together, creating sharp sounds meant to confuse and agitate the beast. Others shouted, driving it toward a narrow patch of marshland where the ground softened. Each step of the mammoth grew heavier, its movements slowed by the mud. This was the hunter's chance. Spears flew again. One struck deep, lodging between ribs. The mammoth reared, trumpeting in rage, and with a violent sweep of its tusks, it sent a young hunter crashing to the ground. Blood stained the grass. The circle faltered. For a moment, fear threatened to dissolve the fragile unity. But then another hunter stepped forward, his torch blazing. Firelight reflected in the mammoth's eyes. The beast hesitated, shaking its head, torn between rage and confusion. The others rallied, pressing closer, their voices rising as one. It was in moments like these that humanity's fate was decided, not in safety, but in confrontation, in the fragile balance between death and determination. Each thrust of a spear, each cry of defiance, carved deeper into the bond that held the group together. The outcome of this battle was still uncertain. But one truth had already emerged: against the might of the beast, only unity gave humans a chance. The story of humanity. The marsh churned beneath the mammoth's feet. Mud clung to its legs, slowing its colossal strides, yet its fury burned brighter than ever. It trumpeted, tusks slicing the air, eyes blazing with primal rage. Around it, the hunters moved like sparks around a flame, darting in, striking, then retreating before death could find them. That was about to cross another threshold. One spear struck true, sinking deep into the beast's shoulder. Blood gushed, steaming against the cold air. The mammoth screamed, a sound so raw it shook the marrow of every bone. Yet instead of retreating, the hunters answered with shouts of their own, voices blending into a rising storm. And then came fire. Torches were raised high, their flames dancing wildly. The hunters thrust them forward, forming a barrier of light and heat. To the mammoth, fire was both alien and terrifying. It trumpeted again, shaking its massive head, unsure whether to advance or withdraw. Science suggests that this was a pivotal moment in human prehistory, the fusion of fire and hunting. While fire had already been used for warmth and protection, archaeological evidence points to its eventual use as a strategic tool in the hunt, to corral animals, to blind and frighten, to weaken the mighty. With fire, humans held more than stone and wood, they wielded fear itself. But victory came at a cost. One hunter, too bold, rushed in close, torch in one hand, spear in the other. The mammoth struck with sudden speed, and tusks impaled him, lifting his body before tossing it lifeless into the mud. The clan cried out in grief and rage, yet none faltered. The circle closed again. Torches blazed brighter. Spears rained down. Blood splattered the ground, mingling with firelight. The mammoth staggered, its strength draining, though even in its final moments it fought like a god of the wild. The hunters knew this truth: survival demanded sacrifice. And as they pressed on, their hands slick with sweat and blood, they also knew something greater, that fire and blood together could reshape the balance of the world. The giant fell with a final cry that echoed across the steppe. The ground shook as the mammoth collapsed into the marsh, its body sinking slightly into the mud. Silence followed, broken only by the heavy breathing of the hunters and the hiss of torches extinguished in damp soil. The impossible had been done, the beast was slain. But victory bore a shadow. Two hunters lay still, struck down by tusks and trampling feet. The clan gathered around them, grief etched into their faces. The fallen were not forgotten, their sacrifice was woven into the story of the hunt. For every triumph in this harsh world carried a price, and today, the price was blood. Around the mammoth's vast body, the survivors began their work. Stone tools hacked at thick hide. Meat was cut in great slabs, rich with fat that would sustain the group through long nights. Bones were set aside, to be shaped into tools and weapons. Even the tusks would serve, symbols of power, or perhaps offerings to the unseen forces of the wild. Anthropologists remind us that such hunts were more than just survival. They were rituals of community. Sharing the meat forged bonds, ensuring that no member of the clan was left behind. In some prehistoric sites, evidence shows that even the elderly and disabled were nourished by the spoils of great hunts, proving that care and cooperation were as vital to humanity's success as strength and courage. Around the fire, the story began to take form. Elders recounted the clash of tusks and spears, the moment when fire drove the beast to hesitation, the bravery of those who fell. Children listened with wide eyes, absorbing not just facts but meaning, that courage, sacrifice, and unity defined who they were. Science tells us that memory and storytelling shaped the evolution of culture. Through tales like this, knowledge was preserved and passed on, not only how to hunt, but why it mattered. The mammoth had become more than prey. It was now a legend, a chapter in the shared identity of the clan. As the night deepened, smoke rose into the starry sky. Meat roasted, bones cracked, and voices carried into the darkness. The spoils of the hunt filled their bellies, but the sacrifice of their kin filled their hearts with something greater, a sense of belonging, of continuity, of being more than individuals lost to the wild. The hunt was over, but its memory had just begun to live. When the last scraps of meat were roasted and the bones cracked open for marrow, the hunters carried with them something more enduring than food, a story to preserve. The mammoth had fallen, comrades had been lost, and the memory of it all demanded to be shared, remembered, and passed on. Deep within a cave not far from the hunting grounds, firelight flickered against rough stone walls. Shadows danced as hands smeared ash, ochre, and charcoal across the rock. Shapes began to form, the outline of the mammoth, tusks curved like crescents, small figures of hunters with spears raised, a halo of fire surrounding the beast. It was not art for beauty's sake, it was memory carved in flame and stone. Archaeology confirms such moments. Caves across Europe and beyond, Chauvet, Lascaux, Altamira, preserve vivid paintings of giant beasts hunted by humans tens of thousands of years ago. These images were more than decoration, they were records of experience, teaching tools, and perhaps rituals of remembrance. Some bones bear carvings, some stones hold etched lines that echo the rhythm of a hunt. Children watched in awe as the elders explained each mark, here the beast fell. Here the fire burned. Here, our brothers stood. In that smoky cave, history was born, not written in words, but painted in color and shadow. Anthropologists call this the dawn of collective imagination. Stories no longer lived only in the breath of a storyteller, bound to fade with time. Now, they endured beyond a single life, etched into stone, glowing in firelight. This ability to preserve memory across generations became the seed of culture, the bridge between past and future. The cave echoed not only with the crackle of fire, but with something deeper, the echo of identity. To paint was to declare, we were here. We fought. We survived. And as the hunters stepped back from their crude but powerful images, they understood that the hunt was not only about meat and survival, it was about leaving a mark upon the world, a defiance of forgetting. The mammoth's fall was more than a victory, it was a turning point. Around the fire, the hunters no longer looked like fragile beings at the mercy of nature. They had brought down a creature many times their size. In that triumph, a new awareness stirred, humans could master the wild, not merely endure it. The circle of hunters, once hesitant and fragile, had become a symbol of something greater. Together, they had wielded fire, weapons, and strategy to alter the balance of power. The beasts of the steppe, once rulers of land and shadow, now had rivals unlike any they had faced before, rivals who fought not with claws or fangs, but with thought, courage, and cooperation. Science supports this transformation. Anthropologists argue that big game hunting demanded advanced planning, coordination, and trust, which in turn nurtured the growth of early language. The calories from mammoth meat, dense in protein and fat, fueled the rapid expansion of the human brain. What began as survival had, step by step, become evolutionary acceleration. The hunters themselves felt the shift, though they had no words for it. Around the fire, elders told the story of the hunt with pride. Children looked on with wide eyes, imagining themselves as the ones who would one day take up the spear and torch. Even grief for the fallen transformed into honor, their deaths remembered as proof of courage, woven into the very fabric of the tale. In caves and on bones, the memory of the mammoth lived on. These were not just records, but declarations: we are hunters. We are strong. We stand together. Such declarations marked the birth of human identity, carried forward in story, ritual, and song. The moment when humans first realized they could control the fate of creatures larger and stronger than themselves was the moment they began to shape the world in their image. This was the dawn of dominance, not of cruelty, but of survival transformed into mastery. And from that point on, the wilderness would never see humans the same way again. Night on the steppe was never silent. The wind whispered through tall grasses, insects buzzed in the shadows, and now another sound crept in, a deep, guttural growl echoing from the dark. Pairs of glowing eyes appeared at the edge of the firelight. This was no fireside tale, but harsh reality: the predators had come. The mammoth's blood and flesh carried far on the wind. Hyenas, wolves, even cave lions were drawn to the feast. They knew where blood pooled, a banquet awaited. Yet this time, humans were there, not as scavengers fleeing in fear, but as hunters armed with fire. Flames crackled as dry wood was thrown onto the blaze. Torches flared, lifted high, forming a circle of light against the vast darkness. The hunters shouted, beat sticks against stone, creating sharp sounds that sliced through the night. The predators advanced, then hesitated, their eyes flickering between hunger and caution. It was a contest not of claws but of psychology, noise and fire against instinct. Science tells us that nights like this forged one of humanity's most vital traits: collective vigilance. Anthropologists argue that the first night watches around the fire were humanity's earliest security systems, where groups took turns guarding while others slept. This was the beginning of 24-hour cooperation, a rhythm that no other species had mastered. Archaeological evidence supports the danger. Fossilized bones of Homo erectus and Homo habilis show bite marks from large predators, grim reminders that without fire and unity, extinction was never far away. In that tense night, a single moment tipped the balance. A lion roared and lunged to the very edge of the firelight. One hunter cried out, thrusting a torch forward. The rest followed, their voices rising together, torches blazing. Firelight flared against the lion's golden mane, and with a snarl of frustration, it turned and melted back into the dark. One by one, the predators retreated, defeated not by muscle, but by the alliance of humans and fire. That night, humanity learned a new truth: fire did not only ward off cold and darkness, it shifted the balance of power between hunter and hunted. By dawn, the mist had lifted, and the mammoth's remains lay scattered across the ground. The meat was stored, the hides prepared, and the bones stacked. Yet the most lasting part of the hunt was not the food, it was the memory that demanded to endure. Some hunters picked up sharp stones and large bones, scratching lines into their surfaces. Curved shapes hinted at the mammoth's massive body, clusters of dots marked where spears had struck. Crude, simple, but powerful, these marks were the first attempts to capture a story beyond words. Children watched with wide eyes as elders explained each line, each scar of stone and bone a replay of the great hunt. Inside a nearby cave, firelight flickered once more. Hands blackened with charcoal reached up to the wall, tracing the outline of the fallen beast. Tusks curved like the moon, human figures closed in with spears, fire encircled it all. It was not art for beauty, it was memory burned into rock. Archaeology confirms these impulses. In the caves of Chauvet, Lascaux, and Altamira, paintings tens of thousands of years old show humans facing giant beasts. Elsewhere, carved bones and etched stones reveal marks that scientists interpret as early hunting records. These were not decorations, they were lessons, reminders, and perhaps sacred rituals of remembrance. Anthropologists call this the dawn of collective imagination. Knowledge no longer lived only in breath and voice, vanishing with the storyteller. It now lived in matter, surviving across generations. A child born years after the hunt could still witness it, seeing the mammoths fall on cave walls or in etched bone. This was the seed of history, planted long before writing. Imagine that smoky cave, firelight dancing on stone, painted figures seeming to move with the flicker of the flames. Elders retold the hunt, children listened, and the memory solidified, not only as history, but as identity. From these simple carvings and drawings, humanity created more than survival tactics. They forged a legacy, the ability to make a moment last forever. The mammoth was gone, its body shared, its bones scattered, its hide stretched. Yet what remained was greater than any physical prize. The hunt had left behind a legacy, one that would ripple through generations. Around the fire, elders told the story again and again. The hunters who stood firm against the charge, the fire that held back the predators, the unity that brought down a giant. Each retelling was more than memory, it was instruction, a way to pass on courage, skill, and identity. The hunt became not just an event but a mythic foundation for what it meant to be human. Science affirms this process. Anthropologists note that collective storytelling after great hunts may have been the root of shared values, shaping the moral codes of early tribes. Bravery, loyalty, sacrifice, these abstract ideals first lived inside stories told beside the fire, long before they had names. Archaeological finds of decorated tusks and ritual burial sites suggest that the meat of the mammoth was consumed not only as food, but as symbol, binding the community in shared purpose. The hunters themselves likely felt it without words, the sense that they were no longer just individuals struggling to survive, but a people who could change the world together. In the silence after the final feast, as smoke rose into the pale morning sky, the tribe moved on. Yet behind them, etched into bones, painted onto walls, and carried in living memory, the mammoth remained. A reminder of the night when humans proved they could face the impossible, and prevail. That victory was not just over the mammoth. It was over fear, fragility, and limitation. It marked the moment when humanity stepped onto the path of dominance, armed with fire, courage, and the stories that would outlive them all. This was the legacy of the hunt, not the death of a giant, but the birth of something greater, the enduring power of humanity to unite, remember, and shape its destiny.